Morning came early to the little house across the road. The sun had only just begun to rise above the trees when the first light slipped through the broken edges of the shutters and stretched across the worn wooden floor inside. Dust hung quietly in the air, shifting slowly in the warmth of the morning. Outside, the world was already waking. The hum of insects moved through the grass. Somewhere in the distance, a truck rolled along the highway before fading again into quiet. The scent of damp earth and cut lumber lingered around the yard. Michael stepped out onto the porch with a measuring tape in one hand and a carpenter's pencil tucked behind his ear. He paused there for a moment. The house stood still in the early light. It wasn't empty. Not really. The marks of his grandfather were still everywhere, subtle but unmistakable. The worn edge of the porch step where years of boots had passed. The old nail holes along the railing where something had once been hung. The way the front door sat just slightly off-center in its frame. Michael took it in without expression. Then he stepped forward and set the end of the tape against the porch post, pulling it across the length of the railing with steady hands. The wood was new where they had replaced it. Clean, level, strong. It didn't match the rest of the house yet, but it would. Behind him, the screen door creaked open. Todd stepped out onto the porch, one hand dragging loosely through his hair, still shaking off sleep. "You start before the sun every day?" he asked, his voice rough with the morning. Michael didn't look up from the tape. "Only when there's work to do." Todd gave a quiet breath that might have been a laugh and leaned his shoulder against the porch rail. From there, he could see across the road. The grocery store sat still in the early light, its windows dark, the door closed. A crate had been left near the entrance from the day before. The town around it hadn't quite come to life yet. It felt slower here, held in place somehow. "Feels different," Todd said after a moment. Michael marked the measurement with the pencil and reeled the tape back in. "Different how?" Todd shrugged slightly, still looking across the road. "Quieter," he said, "like nothing's in a hurry." Michael set the tape down and picked up the hammer resting near the steps. "That won't last," he said. Todd smiled faintly. "Maybe not." Michael stepped down into the yard and lifted a board from the stack leaning against the side of the house. Work had already begun to reshape the place. The porch no longer sagged under its own weight. Several of the worst boards had been replaced. The frame along the back corner had been reinforced where time had begun to pull it apart. There was still more to do, a lot more, but the house was holding again. Todd pushed himself off the railing and followed him down into the yard. For a moment, he just stood there, looking at the structure, at the lines of it, at the way the new wood stood out against the old, at the quiet street stretching past it. "You think it'll come back?" he asked. Michael didn't hesitate. "Yeah." Todd nodded once. Michael set the board in place and reached for the nails. The first strike of the hammer broke the quiet. Then another, and another. The rhythm settled in quickly, steady, deliberate, certain. The kind of work that didn't need explaining. The kind that built something, whether anyone was watching or not. Across the road, the grocery store remained still. The day had not quite begun, but it was coming, and so was everything that would follow. The bell above the grocery door gave a soft chime as it opened. The sound lingered in the quiet of the store, light and familiar, as if it had been ringing that way for years. Inside, the air was cooler than the road outside. The scent of dry goods and fresh produce filled the small space. Flour, citrus, wood, and something faintly sweet. Shelves lined the walls, neatly stocked but worn from use. A counter stood near the front window, its surface clean. A small register resting beside a stack of paper sacks. Rosa stood behind it, sorting through a crate of oranges. She worked with steady hands, turning each one slightly as she placed it in a careful row. The motion was practiced, almost automatic, but not careless. Everything had its place. The bell chimed again. Rosa looked up. Todd stepped inside, pausing just past the door as his eyes adjusted to the dimmer light. Dust clung lightly to his shirt from the work across the road. His sleeves were rolled, and there was a faint line of sweat along his collar from the morning heat. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Rosa set the last orange in place and straightened. "You're new," she said. Her voice was calm, not unfriendly, just observant. Todd glanced around the store once before looking back at her. "Just got in yesterday," he said. Rosa nodded slightly, as if that confirmed something she had already guessed. "You're working on the house," she said. Todd followed her gaze, briefly toward the window. The house stood across the road, quiet in the midday light. "Yeah," he said, "trying to anyway." Rosa's expression softened just a little. It looked better the last few days. Todd smiled faintly. "That's the idea." She stepped around the end of the counter and brushed her hands lightly against her apron. "My uncles owned this store a long time," she said. "We've been watching that place for years." Todd glanced back toward the house again. "Been empty long?" Rosa shook her head. "No," she said. "An older man lived there." She paused. "He passed not long ago." Todd nodded. "That makes sense." Rosa studied him for a moment. "You're not from here." "No," Todd said. "Pennsylvania." "That's far." "Feels like it," he said. Rosa gave a small, knowing nod. People passed through sometimes. Most didn't stay. Todd stepped a little farther into the store, glancing at the shelves. "You get much business?" he asked. "Enough," Rosa said. "People come when they need something." Todd smiled slightly. "Seems like the kind of place where people come even when they don't." Rosa allowed the smallest hint of a smile at that. "That happens too." There was a quiet pause. Not awkward, just unhurried. Todd rested his hand lightly against the counter. "You always work here?" he asked. "Most days." "You like it?" Rosa considered the question. Then she said simply, "It's what needs to be done." Todd nodded. He understood that answer. Outside, a truck passed slowly along the road, its sound drifting in and out through the open door. Todd glanced toward it, then back at her. "Well," he said, "I should probably get back before Michael thinks I wandered off." Rosa nodded. He doesn't seem like the kind who likes delays. Todd gave a small laugh. "No, he doesn't." He stepped back toward the door. The bell chimed again as he opened it. Rosa returned to the crate of oranges, though her attention lingered just a moment longer than before. "You'll be back," she said, not looking up. Todd paused in the doorway. Then he smiled. "Maybe." The door closed behind him. The bell gave one last soft ring, and the store settled again into its quiet rhythm. The bell above the grocery door gave a soft jingle as Rosa turned the sign from open to closed. Evening had settled over the small stretch of road, easing the heat of the day into something softer. The sky beyond the trees had taken on long bands of gold and pale violet, and the air carried the faint sweetness of orange blossoms drifting in from the groves. Across the road, the house sat quiet in the fading light. Todd waited near the edge of the yard, hands resting loosely at his sides. When Rosa stepped out and pulled the door closed behind her, he straightened. "You're right on time," he said. Rosa slipped the key ring into the pocket of her apron. "I told you we close at 7. Todd nodded toward the road. "Ready?" Rosa glanced once more at the store, making sure everything was settled, then stepped down from the porch. They began walking slowly along the edge of the road. For a few moments, neither of them spoke. The town moved quietly at that hour. A screen door closed somewhere in the distance. A radio played faintly through an open window before fading again. The last of the daylight stretched long shadows across the ground. Rosa folded her hands lightly in front of her as they walked. "So," she said after a moment, "tell me about where you're from." Todd smiled a little. "It's not much to look at." "That's what people say about this place too," Rosa replied. Todd let out a quiet laugh. "Well then, you'd feel right at home." She glanced at him. "What's it like?" Todd thought for a moment. "It's small," he said. "You can walk from one end of town to the other without much trouble. Everybody knows each other." Rosa nodded. "That can be good or bad. Depends on the day," Todd said. They passed a small church set close to the road, its white siding catching the last of the light. "My mother sits on the porch most evenings," Todd continued. "After supper, she brings out a glass of tea and listens to the crickets start up in the fields." Rosa listened quietly. "You miss it?" she asked. "Sometimes." He glanced ahead. "It's quieter than most places." Rosa gave a small, thoughtful nod. This town is quiet too. Todd looked around. Different kind of quiet. How feels like things come and go more, he said. People passing through. Rosa considered that. That's true. They walked a little farther before she spoke again. My father came here when I was small, she said. He worked in the orange groves outside town. Todd nodded. He liked the land, Rosa continued. Said the trees reminded him of home. Where was that? Texas first, she said. Before that, Mexico. The road stretched out ahead of them, dimming slowly as the light faded. Rosa was quiet for a moment. We lost him a few years ago, she added softly. Todd looked over at her. I'm sorry. Rosa gave a small shrug. The kind that comes from carrying something for a long time. My mother still needs the store, she said. My brothers too, so I stay. Todd nodded. He understood that. They walked in silence for a few steps. Lights began to appear in the windows of the houses they passed. You ever think about leaving? Todd asked. Rosa gave a small, almost thoughtful breath. Sometimes. Then she looked ahead again. But my family is here. Todd didn't answer right away. He glanced back toward the direction of the house, across the road, then toward the grocery, then ahead again. You know, he said slowly, I didn't expect to stay in Florida very long. Rosa looked at him. And now? Todd smiled slightly. Now I'm not so sure. Rosa didn't answer, but the quiet look she gave him said she understood. They continued walking as the last of the light slipped away, and for the first time, the road didn't feel like something that led away from where they were. It felt like something that might lead them forward. Late afternoon settled gently over the road as the heat of the day began to ease. The light had softened, turning the edges of everything warm and gold. A breeze moved through the trees, carrying the faint scent of citrus and dry grass. Rosa stepped out of the grocery store and paused on the porch. Across the road, the house stood in the quiet. It looked different now, not finished, but no longer forgot. She stepped down into the yard and crossed the road slowly, her eyes moving over the changes as she approached. The porch had been rebuilt along the front. New boards ran clean and level where the old ones had once sagged. The railing stood straight. The steps felt solid beneath her feet. She paused near the bottom step and rested her hand lightly on the new wood. It was smooth, carefully set, not rushed. From the side of the house, the sound of a hammer carried into the quiet. Rosa moved around the corner. Michael stood near the back wall, measuring a section of framing where part of the siding had been removed. His sleeves were rolled, and there was a thin line of sweat across his collar from the day's work. He didn't notice her at first. Todd did. He straightened slightly from where he had been holding a board in place. You came over, he said. Rosa nodded. I wanted to see. Michael glanced up then, following Todd's voice. For a moment, he simply looked at her. Then he he gave a small nod. Afternoon. Afternoon, Rosa replied. She stepped a little farther into the yard, her attention still on the house. You've done a lot already, she said. Michael set the measuring tape down and stepped back to look at the wall. Just the beginning. Rosa studied the framing. It feels different, she said. Todd leaned the board against the wall and wiped his hands on a rag. Better or worse? Better, Rosa said quietly. She walked back toward the front of the house, the two men following more slowly behind her. Standing in the yard, she looked up at the windows. The glass had been cleaned, the frames straightened. Light reflected across them. Now, instead of being swallowed by dust and neglect. My father used to walk past this place, she said. Todd glanced at her. When it was still lived in. Rosa nodded. He would stop sometimes, she said. Said the man who lived here kept things in order. Michael's expression shifted slightly, though he said nothing. Rosa turned back toward the porch. It's good to see it standing again. Michael followed her gaze. It will, he said. Rosa looked at him for a moment, as if measuring something she couldn't quite put into words. Then she nodded once. I should get back, she said. We'll be closing soon. Todd stepped forward slightly. I can walk you. Rosa hesitated, just a fraction of a second. Then she gave a small nod. All right. Michael picked up the hammer again, already turning back toward the work. I'll still be here, he said. Todd gave a quick glance back at him. Don't work through supper. Michael didn't look up. We'll see. Rosa and Todd stepped back onto the road together. The light continued to fade around them. Behind them, the sound of the hammer started again, steady, unhurried, certain. And the house, for the first time in a long while, felt like something that was no longer being left behind. The afternoon sun hung warm over the yard as Michael drove the last nail into the new porch board. The sound rang clean and sharp, then settled into the quiet around them. He lowered the hammer and stepped back, looking along the line of the railing. The porch stood straight now. Fresh boards ran clean and level from one end to the other. The posts were firm. The steps no longer shifted under weight. It wasn't finished, but it was solid. Michael rested one hand against the wood, checking it by feel more than sight. Behind him, Todd set his hammer down on the porch rail and wiped his hands slowly across a worn rag. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Across the road, the grocery store door opened and closed as a few late customers moved in and out. The rhythm of the town carried on, steady and unhurried. Todd stepped down off the porch into the yard. He turned and looked at the house, really looked at it. Not just the boards they had replaced, but the structure beneath it, the way the lines held together, the way it sat on the land. This place, he said, almost to himself. Michael glanced over. What? Todd took a few steps back, giving himself more distance. It's good, he said. Better than I thought when we first pulled up. Michael followed his gaze. My grandfather took care of it, he said. Up until the end. Todd nodded. You can tell. He walked slowly along the front of the yard, eyes moving from the porch to the windows, then up toward the roofline where work still waited. It's got good bones, Todd said. Michael leaned one shoulder against the porch post. Needs a lot yet. Yeah, Todd agreed, but it's worth doing. Michael didn't answer. Todd stopped near the edge of the yard and looked back again. The porch, the front door, the quiet stretch of road beyond. What are you planning to sell it for? He asked. Michael shifted slightly, considering. That depends, he said. Still have to finish the roof, fix the inside, clean up what's left. He glanced at Todd. Why? Todd didn't answer right away. He walked back toward the porch, slower this time, thinking. Then he rested his hand lightly on the railing. Because I'm thinking about buying it. Michael straightened. He studied him more carefully now. You serious? Todd met his gaze. Yeah. Michael pushed off the post and stepped down into the yard. I thought you were heading back to Bethany Grove with me. Todd gave a small shrug. Maybe. He looked back at the house again, at the work they had already done, at what still needed to be finished. At some point, he said, but not yet. Michael crossed his arms. You're moving fast. Todd didn't disagree. Sometimes you know, he said, when something's right. Michael followed his eyes once more to the house. His grandfather's house. The place he had come to repair. Not to keep. The idea settled quietly between them. Not rushed. Not forced. Just present. Michael gave a small nod. Well, he said, we're not selling anything until it's finished. Todd nodded back. I figured. Michael bent to pick up a loose board near the steps. Means more work, he added. Todd reached for the other end without hesitation. Then we better get to it. Michael allowed the faintest hint of a smile. They set the board in place together. The hammer rose again, and the sound of work carried out across the yard, steady, deliberate, building something that neither of them had fully named yet, but both of them understood. The bank sat at the corner of the main road, its brick exterior worn but steady, the kind of building that had seen years pass without needing to announce it. Inside, the air was cooler. The sound of a ceiling fan turned slowly overhead, stirring the quiet more than moving it. A clock ticked steadily on the wall behind the counter. Papers rested in neat stacks, ledgers squared carefully along the edge of a desk. Todd stepped in and paused just inside the door. He removed his hat, holding it lightly in one hand as his eyes adjusted. A man behind the counter looked up. Mr. Jenkins. He was older, his hair thinning and silvered at the edges, his posture straight despite the years. He wore a white shirt with the sleeves rolled neatly at the forearms, and a dark tie loosened slightly at the collar. Afternoon, he said. Afternoon, Todd replied. Mr. Jenkins studied him for a moment. You're not from around here. No, sir. Todd stepped forward. I'm working on the Whitmore place across the road. Recognition settled into the man's expression. The old house, he said. Yes, sir. Mr. Jenkins nodded once, as if placing Todd within the quiet map of the town. What can I help you with? Todd rested his hat against the edge of the counter. I'd like to talk about a loan. Mr. Jenkins did not react immediately. He reached for a pair of glasses from the desk and set them on, then folded his hands lightly in front of him. For the house. Yes, sir. Mr. Jenkins leaned back slightly, studying him again. That's a fair amount of work you're taking on. Todd nodded. I know. You planning to fix it and sell it? Todd shook his head. No, sir. A small pause. Mr. Jenkins' eyes narrowed, just slightly not suspicious, but careful. Then what are you planning? Todd took a quiet breath. To live there. The answer settled in the room. Mr. Jenkins glanced down at the ledger in front of him, then back up. You have family here? No, sir. Employment. I work construction back home, Todd said. I've got steady work waiting if I go back. Mr. Jenkins tapped a finger lightly against the counter. But you're not planning on going back. Todd met his gaze. Not right away. Another pause. The fan continued its slow turn overhead. Mr. Jenkins shifted slightly in his chair. You understand, he said. This isn't something we rush. Yes, sir. You're asking to take on a property that needs work. In a town where you don't have roots. Todd nodded. I understand. Mr. Jenkins watched him a moment longer. Then he asked, more quietly, why here? Todd didn't answer immediately. He looked past the man, toward the front windows, where the light from the road stretched faintly across the floor. Then he said, because it's worth it. Mr. Jenkins held his gaze. For the house, he asked. Todd shook his head. No, sir. Another small pause. Mr. Jenkins removed his glasses and set them down. Well, he said, that's not a number I can write in a ledger. Todd allowed the faintest hint of a smile. I figured. The older man leaned forward slightly. But it tells me something. Todd waited. Mr. Jenkins reached for a form and set it on the counter. We'll start with the paperwork, he said. Income references, what you can put down. Todd picked up the pen. Yes, sir. And we'll see where it goes from there. Todd nodded. That's all I'm asking. The scratch of the pen filled the quiet as he began to write. Outside, the town moved slowly past the windows. Inside, something had shifted. Not loudly, not all at once, but enough to begin. The late afternoon light softened through the front windows of the store, laying a warm, quiet glow across the counter and the worn wooden floor. Rosa stood behind the register, her hands resting lightly on its edge as she looked out across the road. The house sat there, in the fading light. Changed, not finished, but no longer forgotten. The new porch boards caught the sun differently now. The lines were straight. The structure held itself with a kind of quiet steadiness it hadn't had before. For a moment, she simply watched. Then the bell above the door gave a soft chime. Todd stepped inside, brushing a bit of dust from his hands as he crossed the threshold. The day's work still clung to him, sweat along his collar, fine traces of sawdust along his sleeves. Rosa turned back from the window. "You've been busy," she said. Todd gave a small nod, trying to keep up. Rosa glanced again toward the house. "It's standing better. That's the plan." There was a brief pause. Todd shifted his weight slightly, then rested one hand along the counter. "I stopped by the bank today," he said. Rosa looked at him more directly now. "And they didn't send me out the door," he said. "So that's something." Rosa studied him for a moment, as if measuring the weight of that. "You're serious about staying," she said. Todd didn't hesitate. "Yes." The word settled between them. Not rushed, not uncertain, just clear. Rosa lowered her gaze briefly, then folded her hands lightly in front of her. "You said you don't live here," she said. "Not yet." She nodded once, as if that answer mattered more than it seemed. Outside, the light continued to soften. A car passed slowly along the road, then disappeared again into the quiet. Rosa looked back out the window, at the house, at the work that had begun to reshape it. Then she turned back toward Todd. "My mother is making dinner tonight," she said. Todd waited. "We usually eat together," she continued. "After the store closes." Todd gave a small nod. "That sounds nice." There was a moment's pause. Then Rosa added, a little more directly, "You could come." Todd blinked once, caught slightly off guard. "To dinner?" Rosa nodded. "It won't be anything special," she said. "Just food, conversation." Todd smiled. "That sounds like the best kind." Rosa allowed the smallest hint of a smile in return. "You should know," she said. "My mother will ask you questions." Todd gave a quiet laugh. "I expect she will. And my brothers will stare at you, like they're trying to figure something out." Todd nodded once. "I can handle that." Rosa tilted her head slightly, as if not entirely convinced. "We'll see." Todd adjusted his grip on his hat. "What time?" "We close at 7, she said. "Give us a little time after that." "I'll be there." Rosa nodded once. Then she turned back toward the register, though her attention lingered for just a moment longer than before. Outside, the light slipped lower across the road, and for the first time, Todd wasn't just passing through the town. He had been invited into it. Late afternoon light filled Rachel's kitchen, soft and steady against the worn wooden table. Extra chairs had been pulled in from around the house, gathered close, so the women could sit shoulder to shoulder. The table itself had nearly disappeared beneath layers of fabric, small squares of cotton in soft colors, folded and stacked in careful piles. A quilt was beginning to take shape. Angela sat near the end of the table, her hands resting lightly on a piece of fabric she had not yet sewn. Around her, the quiet rhythm of the room continued. Needles moved in and out of cloth. Thread pulled taut. Scissors snipped softly now and then. Rachel sat across from her, guiding a seam with practiced hands. Beside her, Mrs. Carter leaned forward to examine a pattern, while another woman reached for a spool of thread from the center of the table. "It's coming along nicely," Rachel said. "It is," Mrs. Carter agreed. "We'll have it finished before long at this pace." Angela looked down at the piece in front of her. The pattern was careful and deliberate, each square placed with intention, each stitch holding something in place. Jessica sat beside her, working steadily. "You haven't started that one yet," Jessica said quietly. Angela gave a small smile. "I will." Jessica didn't press her. Rachel glanced up briefly. "You picked a good pattern," she said. "Wedding ring quilts take time, but they last." Angela nodded. "That's what I was told." Rachel's expression softened slightly. "They hold together well," she said, "if you do the work right." The words settled gently into the room. Angela threaded her needle. For a moment, her hands were still. Then she began. The needle moved through the fabric once, twice. She kept her eyes on her work. "He wrote," she said after a moment. The motion around the table slowed, just slightly. Rachel did not look up right away. "How is he?" she asked. Angela pulled the thread through and made another stitch. "He says the house is coming along." "That sounds like Michael," Mrs. Carter said with a small smile. "He always was a worker." Angela nodded. "Yes." She made another stitch. Jessica glanced at her, and she asked gently. Angela hesitated. The thread slipped once between her fingers before she caught it again. He didn't say anything else. The room grew quiet again, though the soft movement of sewing continued. Rachel's hands did not stop. "He will," she said calmly. Angela didn't answer. She kept her eyes on the fabric. "I know why he's there," Angela said after a moment. "I do." Her voice stayed steady. "But sometimes—" She paused. Jessica waited. Angela finished the stitch before she spoke again. "Sometimes I don't know if I'm part of what he's building." No one spoke for a moment. The words rested there, honest and unguarded. Rachel finally looked up. Her expression was not surprised. "Men like Michael," she said carefully, "don't always speak the things they feel." Angela looked up slightly. "They show it in what they do." Angela held her gaze. "He left," Angela said. Rachel nodded once. "Yes, but he left to build something he believes matters," she said. "That's not the same as leaving you behind." Angela looked back down at the quilt, the small piece of fabric in her hands, the thread running through it. Jessica reached over and gently straightened the edge of Angela's square. "You're still in it," Jessica said quietly. Angela didn't answer, but her hands steadied. She made another stitch, then another. Around the table, the work continued, piece by piece, thread by thread. Something was being made, even if it wasn't finished yet. Night settled slowly over the house across the road. The last of the light faded from the sky, leaving the yard in a quiet blue-gray stillness. Crickets had begun their steady rhythm in the grass, and somewhere in the distance, a screen door closed. Then all was still again. Inside, the house held the warmth of the day. A single lamp had been set on the small table near the front room, its light soft and contained, reaching only as far as it needed to. Michael sat at the table. A sheet of paper rested in front of him, blank. For a long time, he didn't touch it. The sounds of the evening moved faintly through the open window. The low hum of insects, the occasional passing car far down the road. Todd had already turned in for the night. The house felt quieter because of it. Michael leaned back slightly in the chair, his eyes resting on the page without seeing it. Then, after a moment, he reached for the pen. He turned it once between his fingers, set it down, picked it up again. The motion repeated once more before he finally placed the tip against the paper. He wrote her name first, Angela. The ink settled into the page. He stopped there. His hand rested lightly against the table, as if waiting for something else to follow. Nothing came. He exhaled slowly and leaned forward again. The pen moved. The house is coming along well. He paused. The words sat there, plain and steady. True, but not enough. He stared at the line for a long moment, then continued. We've got the porch finished. The frame along the back wall is holding now. There's still work to do, but it's starting to look like something again. He stopped. The room felt still around him. He could hear the scratch of the pen in his own memory, even after it had lifted from the page. Michael leaned back and read what he had written. It sounded like him. Work, progress, facts that could be measured and seen. He rested the pen against the table again. His fingers tightened slightly around it. There were other things he could write. He knew that. He could tell her he missed her. He could tell her that the quiet in the evenings felt different without her voice filling it. He could tell her that every time he stood back from the work, he thought about what it might look like when she saw it finished. The thoughts came easily, clear, certain, but they stayed where they were, unwritten. Michael looked back down at the page, at her name at the top, at the few lines beneath it. He added one more sentence. I hope things are going well there. He stopped again. The pen hovered for just a moment longer. Then he set it down. The letter wasn't finished, but he didn't continue. Instead, he folded the paper once, carefully, deliberately, then again. He held it there in his hands for a moment, as if weighing it. Then he placed it on the table, not in an envelope, not addressed, just folded The lamplight rested across it quietly. Michael leaned back in the chair and looked toward the darkened window. Outside, the night had fully settled. The work would begin again in the morning. There would be more boards to set, more measurements to take, more progress that could be seen. He understood that kind of work. It moved forward. It built something. It made sense. Michael reached out and slid the folded paper slightly to the side. Not thrown away, not sent, just set aside. And in the quiet of the room, with the night pressing gently against the windows, it remained there, unfinished. Morning came with the steady rhythm of work. The sun rose warm over the yard, catching along the edges of the new boards and the exposed framing where the siding had been pulled away. The air still held a trace of cool from the night, but it wouldn't last long. Michael was already moving. He stood on a short ladder near the side of the house, setting a board into place along the frame. His movements were practiced, measured, efficient, certain. Below him, Todd held the other end steady. Up a little, Michael said. Todd lifted the board slightly. There, hold it. The hammer struck. Once, twice, the nail set clean. Michael drove another beside it, then another, the sound ringing out into the quiet morning. Todd stepped back as Michael climbed down. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The rhythm of the work had carried them through the early hours without needing it. Todd picked up a length of wood from the stack and set it aside, then wiped his hands against his jeans. "You wrote to her?" he asked. Michael reached for another nail. "Yeah." Todd nodded once. "What do you say?" Michael didn't look at him. Told her how the work's going. Todd waited. "That it?" Michael set the nail and raised the hammer again. "That's enough." The hammer came down. Sharp, final. Todd watched him a moment longer. "No, it's not." Michael didn't respond. He moved to the next section of the frame and set another board in place. Todd stepped closer. "You're telling me you sat down, wrote her a letter, and all you had to say was about lumber and nails?" Michael's jaw tightened slightly. "It's what I'm doing." "That's not what I asked." Michael drove another nail. The sound carried harder this time. Todd let out a slow breath. "She's back there waiting on you," he said. "You know that." Michael stepped back from the wall. "I didn't ask her to wait." Todd shook his head. "No," he said, "you didn't." He took a step closer, his voice steady but firm. "But she is." Michael looked at him now, just for a moment, then away again. Todd continued, "You think she cares about how straight that porch is?" Michael didn't answer. "She cares about you," Todd said. "About what this means. About whether she's part of it." Michael picked up another board. "She knows." Todd stepped in front of him, stopping the movement. "Does she?" The question sat between them, uncomfortable, honest. Michael's grip tightened slightly on the wood. "I'm here working," he said. "That's what matters." Todd didn't move. Not to her. Michael met his eyes again, then looked past him, out toward the road. The house stood quiet around them, stronger than it had been, closer to finished, but not there yet. Todd's voice softened, but didn't lose its weight. "You're building something," he said. "I can see that." He glanced around the yard. "At first, I thought it was just this place." Michael said nothing. Todd looked back at him. "But it's not." Another pause. "You just haven't decided if she's part of it." Michael's expression didn't change, but something in it shifted. Small, subtle, real. Todd stepped back, giving him space again. "I'm not telling you what to do," he said, "but don't make her guess." Michael stood there, the board still in his hands. The work waited. The house waited. Everything he understood waited. After a moment, he set the board down. Not in place, just aside. Todd watched him, then turned back toward the stack of lumber without another word. The morning moved on around them, but the rhythm had changed, and for the first time since the work had begun, the question Todd had spoken didn't fade with the sound of the hammer. It stayed. The grocery store closed a little later than usual that evening. The last customer lingered longer than expected, and Rosa's mother took her time, finishing a quiet conversation near the counter before walking him to the door. By the time the sign was turned to closed, the sky had already deepened into evening. Warm light spilled from the windows of the house behind the store, soft and steady, carrying the faint sounds of voices and movement from inside. Todd stood at the edge of the yard, hat in hand. He had arrived a few minutes early, not enough to be improper, but enough to feel it. The screen door opened. Rosa stepped out first. She had changed from her work apron into a simple dress, her hair pulled back more neatly than it had been during the day. There was a quiet care in the way she carried herself, not for show, but for the occasion. "You came," she said. Todd gave a small nod. "I said I would." Rosa studied him for just a moment, then gave a faint smile. "Come on." She led him toward the house. The porch boards creaked softly under their steps, worn but steady. Light from inside spilled out across the threshold, warm against the deepening blue of the evening. As they stepped in, the smell of food met them first, something rich and familiar, cooked slowly, prepared with care. The room beyond was simple but full. A wooden table sat at the center, already set. Plates, glasses, and utensils arranged neatly in place. Rosa's mother stood near the stove. She turned as they entered. Her expression was calm, but her eyes were attentive, taking Todd in without rushing the moment. "This is Todd," Rosa said. Her mother stepped forward, wiping her hands lightly on a cloth. "Welcome," she said. "Thank you, ma'am." Her gaze lingered just long enough to measure him. Not unkind, but careful. "You're working on the house," she said. "Yes, ma'am. The Whitmore place. Todd nodded. "Yes, ma'am." She gave a small nod in return. "It's good to see someone tending to it again." From the table, 2 younger boys sat watching. They said nothing, but their eyes followed Todd with open curiosity. Rosa noticed. "These are my brothers," she said. Todd gave them a small nod. "Evening." They nodded back, still studying him. Rosa's mother gestured toward the table. "Sit," she said. "We eat while the food is warm." They took their places. Rosa sat beside Todd, her brothers across from them, her mother at the head of the table. For a moment, the only sound was the passing of dishes. Food was set down, plates filled, water poured, the kind of quiet that wasn't empty, just waiting. Then her mother spoke. "You're not from here," she said. "No, ma'am." Rosa said Pennsylvania. "Yes, ma'am. That's a long way to come for a house." Todd met her eyes. "Yes, ma'am." She watched him a moment. "You planning to stay?" Todd didn't hesitate this time. "Yes, ma'am." Her gaze sharpened slightly. "For the house?" Todd shook his head. "No, ma'am." A small pause settled over the table. Then he said simply, "For Rosa." The room went still, not tense, but attentive. Rosa did not look up right away. Her hands rested quietly in her lap. Her mother studied him more carefully now. "You don't know her very long," she said. "No, ma'am." "And still, you're making plans like that?" Todd nodded. "Yes, ma'am." Her eyes did not leave him. "And what makes you so certain?" Todd didn't rush the answer. He glanced once at Rosa, then back to her mother. "Because I've seen enough to know what matters," he said. The words settled quietly into the room. Her brothers exchanged a glance, but said nothing. Rosa's mother held his gaze a moment longer. Then slowly she nodded. "That's a serious thing you're saying." "Yes, ma'am." Another pause. Then she reached for a dish and passed it across the table. "Eat," she said. The tension eased. Conversation began to move again. Her brothers spoke, asking questions about the house, about the work, about where Todd had come from. Rosa listened quietly, though once or twice she added something small, steadying the flow of the conversation. Todd answered simply. Honestly, he didn't try to make himself larger than he was. And slowly, the room settled around him. At one point, Rosa's mother rose to clear a dish, then paused beside the table. She looked at Todd again. "If you stay," she said, "you stay the right way." Todd nodded. "Yes, ma'am." She held his gaze one last moment, then returned to the kitchen. The meal continued. The voices grew easier. The space between them closed, just a little. And outside, the night settled quietly over the road. Across from the store, the house stood in the dark, waiting, becoming something, just like everything else.